Hello. Woo. Well, I could talk for about an hour about how excited I am that Breath and Clay is happening again. But I'm about to get in the weeds here in a little bit. So maybe you ought to just jump right in, huh? Let's do it. But first I got to say something to Corey. Is that Corey? All right. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors. Rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. I just felt like saying that because I love Dylan Thomas, and I love that poem, and I read it backwards because it was on my phone, and I was scrolling. Let's go. Let's see if my slides are working. Oh, do I get a clicker? We don't need my slides, I guess. Oh, wait, yes, we do. Woo. I've never had one of these little clickers before. Which direction is the right direction? Oh, here we go. The title of my message tonight is Practicing Incarnation, which felt like a great title until I was putting the slides together, and I thought, this looks really culty. But I promise you it's not. I promise you it's not. Let's jump in. I'm going to read some scriptures here. And I really love how some of these same scriptures keep coming up tonight. Then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. Genesis 2:7. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This is my favorite thing that was ever written in the history of humankind. This is my favorite thing that's ever been written, not just in Scripture, in everything that's ever been written. That's my favorite thing. John 1:1. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John 1:14. This next one is not scripture, technically, but it kind of is to me. Basically, there can be no categories such as religious art and secular art because all true art is incarnational and therefore religious. Madeline L'Engle. And that quote is where I got the title, Practicing Incarnation. Super culty title. But here's what I want to do. Before I get in the weeds, I just want to explain what I'm trying to accomplish here in this short time. So when we get super out on the edge, you can come back to this. You know that I'm not completely out of my mind. But I want to talk about the things that we make. And I want to talk about why they matter. And I want to talk about finding a deeper creative well simply by following Jesus. You guys ready? Let's go. I want to start here. This is where it all begins. I used to see them every day on my bus ride to school, and I never didn't ask myself, who did this? Why did they do it? And most of all, what does this mean? On the playground, there's no short of legends surrounding this phenomenon. It's where a drug deal goes down, they said, or it's where a person was killed. It's a gang warning. It also might mean that the mafia has put a hit out on you, but they snuck inside and got your shoes first. They got close enough to kill you, but all they did was take your shoes to tell you that they're going to kill you. I've even done a little bit of homework over the years. Apparently, there's a very old British tradition where people will throw their shoes at a bride and groom as they're leaving. I'm glad that one didn't stick. I was going to make another comment, but I'm not going to. About who maybe we could throw our shoes at. But also, apparently in the military, it's a common thing, or was a common thing when you're done, when you are discharged and you're done with the military, you'll take your boots and throw them up on the roof, as to say, I will not put these boots on again. I've worn my boots well, but I will not wear them again, right? None of this ever really satisfied me, though. Eventually, however, as we humans do, I stopped asking questions and I got busy with the hard work of growing up. I stopped looking up at the sky and the power lines and started looking down at my phone or my waistline or the clock, or better yet, the road ahead of me. That road, however, led me to become a father, and a predictable thing began to happen not long after my kids were old enough to talk. Every car ride, they began to ask, why are the shoes on the power line? Who did this and what does it mean? It began to drive me a little bit crazy. I may or may not have begun to avoid neighborhood roads where the shoes were hanging, because I may or may not have grown tired of saying, I don't know who did it, I don't know why they did it, and I really, really don't know what it means. But one day it hit me. As a joke, I retorted, they did it so you would bug me about it. In that moment, I realized I had discovered the truth. There may be any number of side reasons for throwing a pair of shoes up on a wire, but I'm convinced there is one main reason. The reason you throw a pair of shoes up on a wire is so I will wonder about it. So old folks will huff and puff about it, so kids will bug their parents to death about it, and swap urban legends on the playground. The main reason is so people will notice that it happened. And they announce, they notice that it happened. Shoes don't wrap themselves around the power line. The shoes are a result of human will. And they announce to the world that a human was here. A human life may have not been acknowledged by any other human, yet has become the topic of conversation for my children every day for the last 6 months. They've never met this person, nor shall they probably ever, but they are still obsessed with whoever this is. On that same corner where the shoes live, there is unfortunately often a person asking for money. And sadly, we don't always notice or talk about the person, though sometimes we do give them some change. But we always talk and hear about the stupid shoes. Those shoes that dangle there in the wind are screaming, hey, whoever you are, I need you to know that I was here. I need you to know that I existed, and I need you to wonder about me. All true art is incarnational and therefore religious. Dare I say there's something sacred about the shoes? It's art on the most basic level because it's an attempt to endue a part of the dead world with a living self. To incarnate means to take the invisible spirit and to manifest it in the visible natural world. It's to make the invisible visible. Jesus is the image of the invisible God. All decent attempts at creativity are religious because they are all incarnational. Because all honest attempts to create are attempts to take dead objects, dead air, or dead space and breathe the breath of life into them. We take dead things like shoes and we remind people that they have been touched by a living soul. Did you see what I did there? A life exists, and by proxy, they are an extension of that life. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We, like our Heavenly Father, are defined by the ways we're determined to take our insides and make them outsides. We're all engaged in the work of manifesting our ideas and desires in the world through action. We, like God, are always trying to make our words into flesh, as our inner life begs to be outwardly known. We are a creative species. Oddly enough, though, creatives don't really create anything. We don't materialize particles from thin air. We don't usually invent new musical scales, contrary to what Stephen may tell me that he does. I lost my place. I was thinking about Stephen. A painter can't invent a new spectrum of color. No, we take what's already here and we move it around. We manipulate the existing world into new configurations so it can be seen or experienced again in a new way, or so it can be truly seen for the first time. This is how creatives re-enchant the world. They defamiliarize us with the miraculous world that we, through overexposure, have mistakenly decided is common. The photographer chooses a subject, a person that we might fail to see on the street, maybe by the shoes. And she breathes dignity into this person by the way she captures and presents them in an image. The poet reminds us that there is nothing more extraordinary than ordinary love. Graffiti reminds us that the unseen are always with us, and just because they aren't seen doesn't mean they aren't real. And writers, more often than not, reintroduce us to ourselves. They trick us into dealing with our own issues by telling fantastic stories about other people far away. What if I told you that Godzilla wasn't about a monster, but really a story about shame? And what if I told you Guardians of the Galaxy wasn't about space pirates, but about family? And what if I told you that Nemo wasn't about a talking clownfish, but about confronting the fear of loss? Are you familiar with the concept of Native American tree bending? The Apache, Navajo, and Pueblo peoples would shape living trees into new forms that didn't exist naturally. One reason they did this was to mark the way for people on a journey. When you saw the tree that didn't grow like the other trees, you knew that one of these trees had been touched by the will and soul of a human, and so you would be reminded of where you are and where you're going. We, like tree benders, are constantly shaping the world in ways that remind people that their universe is significant and they're not alone in it. When human beings move things around with care and intention, you can happen upon them later and feel the residue of their life. They have, in a strange way, made an imprint on the physical world and continue to speak to us long after they're gone. This next one is really just for me, because it matters to me. But once I saw Bob Marley's handwritten lyrics to Turn Your Lights Down Low, I may or may not have cried just a little bit. Because I felt like he'd just written them and walked out of the room. Because he kind of had. The world still feels the ripples of the lives that have come before us. You still can feel the effects of people in the things that they've made. Why is it that houses are so often haunted in our stories? If a thing is going to be haunted, it's almost always a house. I think it's because it's impossible to not hear the people who once walked the halls and slept in the beds and ate meals in that place. It's just kind of odd to be in a house that has no people. Obviously, I don't believe in ghosts, mostly. But I absolutely believe you can feel the ripples and waves of my living spirit in the things I set my will and hands upon. The same way I felt those ripples from the ones who came before me and the ones who came before them, like a link on a chain all the way back to the time before time. And it makes me believe that if I do my job well, or at least with a level of honesty, you might also be able to hear the echo of an original ancient will who put his imprint on the dust and formed my face, my heart, and my big feet. All this so he could rudely string my size 13s on a lamppost by your house, and so your kids would never stop asking, who did this? Why did they do it? And what does it mean? I want to talk about meaning. I want to talk about meaning, but I want to take a little bit of a left turn to do it. Before Jesus began his ministry, he was led into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And his first temptation was to make bread. How ridiculous does that sound? Make bread. I failed you, Lord. What did you do, son? I made bread and I ate it. Why did you do that? Because I was hungry. Whenever something doesn't make sense, there's another story there. On the surface, it seems a little silly. What's wrong with a piece of bread? But let's consider a few questions. How much time do you feel like you spend thinking about bread? How much time do you spend thinking about putting bread on the table, or how to pay the bills, or how to afford your next project? How much sleep have you lost? How many hours, days, and years of your life have you dumped into the black hole of anxiety around how to make more bread? How much time do you spend in conflict between the things you make to buy bread versus the things you feel called to make? And how much do these thoughts shape the way you make what you make? I'd imagine this is the fundamental conflict for every artist. Even as an artist who has seen a measure of worldly success, I have to be honest and tell you that this is one I still wrestle with every single day. Do I make what I love or crush my soul to make what sells? Or do I make what I love and crush my soul on TikTok trying to convince you that it's worth buying? Or do I make what I love that doesn't sell and crush my soul to see my family struggle? Or maybe, by luck and sheer determination, the thing I love does sell, but then what do I do when I feel like I don't love it anymore? I don't want to come across insensitive here. Lack is a very real problem. You absolutely must think about it because you really do have to survive. 0 dead people are still making albums, except Tupac, but he's not really dead. Remember, Jesus didn't say people don't need any bread. He said we can't live by bread alone. No shame for people who struggle. But the temptation then is not to eat bread. The temptation is to think bread is your highest calling. Your highest calling is not to survive or even to succeed. Jesus knows that the human machine needs more than just bread and success to survive. We need a reason. We need meaning. Notice something. Later on, when Jesus is in the wilderness with 5,000 people, what does he do for them? Does anybody know the number 5,000 from the Bible? What does he do for 5,000 people? He makes bread. He makes bread. He made bread for them. And there was more left over than he had before. When you make bread for yourself, you're often left with rocks, cold rocks, like in the wilderness. When you make bread for the people you love, you sometimes have more left over than you began with. Jesus won't make bread to save himself, but he will make bread for you. Because we find a deep sense of meaning when we make something that truly matters for someone else. Have you ever thought about this? Don't you think it's interesting that we live in a moment when our highest cultural value and our most detested cultural value seem ironically similar? Self-love is touted as our greatest value and narcissism our most hated, but on paper? On paper, I looked up narcissism. It essentially means to love yourself. I certainly think we should love ourselves, but maybe the difference is that narcissism is a kind of naive self-obsession that doesn't really understand how a self works. A healthy self-love also must include the awareness that a self was made to love something greater than itself. The human self is healthiest when it's postured towards something greater. It's one of those paradoxes of life. You often find yourself by giving yourself away. Think about that in the light of this verse. For whoever would save his life, will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. So if you truly love yourself, you will also love something else more. Otherwise, you'll be sucked into the vacuum of meaninglessness, and you will die, first on the inside and then on the outside. People cannot thrive in success alone. When we don't have meaning, we starve inside. We lose the willingness to even participate in the things we need to do to survive. You could say without meaning, people cast off restraint. Viktor Frankl said, when a person has lost meaning, they will distract themselves with pleasure. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor. During his time in the death camps, he knew that you were finished when he saw you smoking your own cigarettes. In the camps, you were given less food than you needed to survive, so you would do favors for the guards, and they would give you cigarettes, and you would trade the cigarettes for more food. So when he saw you smoking your own cigarettes, he knew you'd lost the will to press on. Jesus said his bread was to do the will of the Father. That will was always about a posture towards the people that he loved. And then Jesus said something even wilder. So first of all, Jesus won't make bread. And second of all, he'll in the wilderness again, he will make bread for you. But then it gets even crazier. Then Jesus said, I am bread. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. Jesus became bread. Let's pause for just a minute and think about something. Have you ever been to a restaurant or retail store before they turn the music on? I did that the other day. I was at Total Wine. I was like, it feels weird in here. I realized it's because there was no music playing. I don't know how many of you want to admit to this, but have you ever stayed at a bar to the end? Back in your old life, maybe? Right? Maybe just once or twice after COVID. But you know what they do to you at the end when they want to go home? They turn the music off. They turn the lights on and they turn the music off. Retail and restaurants, places know that people like to be in places that have music because music makes them feel like they're not alone. They know that music makes you stay because it makes you feel not alone. Music is like the spirit of a room, and sometimes when it's gone, the room feels dead. Music carries the thoughts and ideas of another human heart. It's almost like another person is right there in the room spending their afternoon with you. So in one sense, when you hear it, you aren't alone. See, art is not just a thing we do for pleasure and entertainment. It's one way we share our very lives with each other and the world and with God. Worship is not just a way we learn our spiritual ABCs. It's one way we give ourselves back to God. At the end of his earthly ministry, on the night he was betrayed, Jesus picked up a piece of bread and broke it and handed it to the disciples. He says, this is my body. See, Jesus is the God who gives himself away. What if your ultimate purpose as an artist was to give yourself away? What if your craft is what if your craft is a container the Lord has given you to fill with your life so that you, like him, could give it away? What if your ultimate purpose as an artist is not to see how much you can get out of your audience, but to share your own life with them in a way that produces meaning, hope, joy, solidarity, and beauty in their lives? I want to begin to wrap things up with an invitation. This is the invitation of Jesus to everybody. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Notice what he doesn't say here. Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will take your burdens upon myself. I mean, he kind of does in other parts of the Bible, but not here. He says, come to me and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. In the same way we find ourselves by giving ourselves away, we also find rest and freedom by taking on a worthy burden. I didn't get a whole lot of amens on that one. It's true. Is the train burdened by the tracks? Is an airplane burdened by its wings? I don't know that the plane and the wings worked as good as the train and the tracks. What is the burden of Jesus that he wants you to carry? What is the yoke? I have some good news. It must be the burden of love. And it must be easy because it's something you've secretly or even subconsciously desired your entire life. You want to do something that matters. And I believe that if you learn how to love your audience, if you learn how to carry the Lord's burden for them and serve them by simply sharing a portion of your life with them through your work, you will be shocked at the response you get. That doesn't mean you're going to make $1 million and be famous, but what it does mean is that at very least, your life will be rich with meaning, purpose, and beauty. I also want to make a note that oddly enough, my experience has been when I focus on making heavenly bread, my work connects with people better. I'm not saying this is a rule or a trick, but I definitely believe that for many of us, even worldly success depends on making deep, long-term connections with human hearts. And when I share my life in my music in a vulnerable and honest way, it always seems to land better than if I'm trying to pander. And don't get me wrong, marketing and monetization are different skills. They're different skill sets, not really what I'm talking about here. However, in my experience, even those things seem easier when I truly believe in the work that I'm doing and love the people that I'm trying to connect with. I know none of us here ever think about those kind of things. This is kind of my final thought. You know, I always thought that the idealized version of myself would be the most successful. And I put a lot of energy into being this idealized version of me, of being a better singer, or writing the best songs, or looking the best. I know we're Christians. We're not supposed to think about how you look. But I do sometimes. Not right now at all. I'm so past that. I'm so past that. But I always thought the idealized version of myself would be the most successful. But it turns out that that has never been true. Because I tend to believe that people are looking for themselves in you. And they usually see themselves through the light that shines through the cracks. Perfection is not just impossible, it's also uninteresting. You may not want to hear this, but it's your flaws and your weakness that endear people to you. Once again, Jesus is the God who became weak so that we could have fellowship with him. Because vulnerability is always the precursor to relationship, it's often our weakness and not our prestige that lets people find a place in our story. And I have to believe that if we follow Jesus, even in our work, we will see new life in it, as will the world around us. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. How do we want to close this down, Stephen?
I got you covered.
Can I read more Dylan Thomas to you? You didn't say no.
Please, no, please go ahead. What you got for us?
The wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning. They do not go gentle into that good night. It's probably not the most appropriate poem for the end of the night.
It's great. It's great. Good. How y'all doing? Everybody holding up okay? You guys are troopers. What time is it? It's almost 11 o'clock.
Don't look at the clock. Don't look at the clock.
I don't know what time it is. Y'all are doing so good. Are you full to the brim? We'll make some room because we got 2 more days, right?
They thought you were going to say 2 more talks.
No, we do not have 2 more talks. You guys are so attentive. I hope you're having a good time. I want to encourage you to mingle and get to know some folks. Some of my best friends I met at Breath in the Clay, and there's some good folks around here willing to go deep quick, and that's a beautiful thing and a rare thing. So a couple things really quick. Tomorrow morning, we are starting at 9 a.m. with Young Oceans, right?
Young Oceans will be here.
Okay.
But at 8:30, we have legit Union Coffee showing up to, like, bless everybody.
Also, we have some good friends that came down from Pennsylvania that will be selling some baked goods. The Postmasters crew, beautiful people, and really good stuff. So we'll have good stuff for sale in the morning. Go check out the book table or the bookstore. It's not just a table; it's a store, and there's lots of good stuff out there. We have Young Oceans, Vesper Stamper, Justin McRoberts, Mary McCampbell, Junius Johnson, and we'll end tomorrow morning with the Live Makers and Mystics podcast before we dive into workshops around 2 o'clock. The visual artist workshop starts at 1:30. So
It's also full.
oh, it's full. Anything else?
No.
Okay.
We're good.
Y'all are great. Have a good evening.